Tell you it's coming, man.
Good morning. It is Sunday, not just any Sunday, it's the Sunday following 7/10. How did you celebrate? Did you concentrate on what you were doing? Or what we were doing was just the concentrate? Well, we're going to talk about that and a lot more topics as we get into better know a candidate as soon as the candidate arrives. Let's hit it. So, speaking of hit it, Chris, first off, welcome back to civilization.
Hey, so yeah, man, it has been a wild ride through the Appalachians over the past month, and going through the Smoky Mountains, getting to meet our brothers in the Eastern Band of Cherokees, and seeing how they operate their dispensary. I mean, it's interesting to go up and down the Eastern Seaboard and see how the various states, regulate cannabis and cannabis products. I would say being in Tennessee and being in Carolina was interesting because everywhere in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, were tons of hemp shops and tons of places, where folks, could get access to a lot of different products, but not the good stuff. And I know we just had 7/10. Happy Dab Day to everyone who had a good time. But I would say, it's definitely been quite the interesting, weekend. And it's good to be back here home in Tampa, Florida.
Well, let's introduce ourselves. My name is Gary Stein. I'm the political director and policy director of Suncoast Normal and the master of public health. Press that little button there. So here's the situation. We got a guest coming, and Chris came home finally. So that there was 3 people to work over at Chillum. However, that means that there wouldn't be any room for Carlos to sit down, especially if the dog gets there.
Indeed, and Carlos, myself, and our guest are very large men, so trying to fit us all on this tiny screens on the Instagram just wouldn't work.
I would say magnificent. I wouldn't say large.
Yeah, indeed. Well, our guest is actually here. He's walking in the building right now, so I'm going to get up. But Gary, how was your weekend? How were things going for you? How did you celebrate Dab Day?
I did not go to Dab Day Festival over in Tampa. I went last year, and I said, oh, my God, it is too damn hot. And this year I said, it's too damn hot again. It was 103 degrees. And I decided to sit it out and just celebrate at home with as many different concentrates as possible. And I see that our guests are kind of maybe on. I'll go ahead and go into the other introductions.
Let's see how sturdy this is. This IKEA furniture is it known for being
okay. Sitting in that chair will be our executive director, coming to us back after coming back from Appalachia, Chris Cano. And also just opposite of him is coming up.
Yeah, like maybe closer to the step than.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can do that. You just can't hit our sound effects, but that's about it.
I see. Let me. How much?
Okay. So while we're waiting for them to get on board, I want to give fond condolences to all the friends and family of Lindsey Graham, who has apparently passed away of an unexpected illness while being where he shouldn't have been in Ukraine. And after Rokena, who was where he shouldn't have been,
got
her
business
detained in Israel. So we had some really weird national news. It's probably going to eclipse everything as usual.
Drama.
Always drama. And I can't believe I'm going to say this, but happy 10th anniversary to Trulieve, our first major MSO who is still growing like a giant amoeba.
Well, Trulieve expanded and retracted over the years as a business. I know looks like they're trying to get out of the rec market, at least from what I can see, so they can be some of the first medical dispensaries under Schedule 3 that have DEA approval, which will be interesting because we've even seen the current Trump administration do a pilot program through Medicare, Medicaid services for CBD products. And so it'll be interesting to see, this big race to which multi-state operator essentially becomes the first in the country to be able to, sell their bud and get the insurance companies to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, Nikki Fried, who, of course, is a member of the executive board of Normal and also the head of the DNC, and also used to be the Commissioner of Agriculture here in Florida, had some very stern words in regards to what Trulieve is doing. I was wondering, why was the CEO Kim selling off 2.5 million shares? And it has something to do with the rescheduling and the fact that they want to essentially make it so that medications end up being sold through Trump RX and things of that sort, and nationalize. The guy who's talking about communism wants to nationalize the cannabis industry. That, I think, is fucking rich.
Well, that is an interesting thing, Gary, that we've seen in the current administration, is that they've been scaring people about communism and socialism, and yet we've seen under the Trump administration, the United States take major stakes in tons of companies, and at the same time, the president enriched himself in personal stock trades. His wealth has skyrocketed by billions recently, and it just speaks to the nature of money and politics. And that's a great segue into our show today and our special guest joining us.
That was kind of my role.
Yeah, because so often money influences politics. It buys elections. But the one thing that I know in my time of just being in politics, money doesn't buy integrity. Those are inherent qualities that just people either have or they don't. And so many politicians play the double speak game. Some of them will smile in your face and as Malcolm X said, will stab you in the back, even pull out the knife just a couple of inches, but not all the way, and still act like they did something for you. And I think that that is a major concern that we have in our state and how we get governed. Because here in Florida, it feels like a pay-to-play system most days. And, we have certain primaries across the state in various districts that get decided by one party. And in a primary that whoever wins that is going to win in the general election, 99% of the time. And that being said, the Democratic primary in House District 64 has shaped up to be, a race with multiple candidates in it. And we've already interviewed one of them. Maybe we can get some more on before the primaries. I know our schedule's booking up fast. So if you're a candidate out there and you're interested in coming on the rotation, definitely reach out to Gary to get your spot booked. I mean, we're pretty much booked almost all the way through August. I think we got one more slide, and we got some special guests that'll be coming for some other high profile races. But I think this race to me in House District 64 is important because it's my home. It's where I live at in Tampa, where I grew up, my neighborhoods. And I think, one of the things that, moved me in life is just seeing how the city was, how I saw my parents struggle, saw, the schools that I went to struggle, and that learning that the people in office have a lot to do with that. And I even so much so went off to college and went back for a second degree in political science and got the opportunity to actually intern in Tallahassee under State Representative Michael Shanti. And it was where I met this gentleman, our special guest today, John Rodriguez, who was the chief of staff for Representative Shanti. John, good to have you on the show today, brother.
It's great to be here, and I apologize for being a few minutes tardy. I guess I was on West Tampa time, although that's really not a great excuse when you're running for office. But nonetheless, thank you for your graciousness in inviting me. And may I just comment on what you were just talking about, the idea of pay to play and money in certainly our state government. Currently, believe it or not, each election cycle, that is a primary, general, and a general election, candidates are allowed to accept up to $1,000 for the primary and another 1,000 from an individual in the general. And when I got into this race, I had to ask myself some hard questions, like, if I accept $1,000 for a primary from somebody, what are they expecting from me? And the only answer I could come up with, or at least that I thought was all too likely, was that they expected me to give them special treatment. So I had to ask myself, well, then what is reasonable? Because $1,000 a pop, then all you have to do is line up some people with deep pockets to fund your campaign, and all you have to do is sell yourself out to them, and that's your path to success. I rejected that path, quite honestly. I am restricting contributions to $100 or less. If you can't afford $100, I understand. Please don't contribute, but I'm not accepting more than that. And if you have $1,000 to give to me, I would suggest give me 100 and take the other 900 and do something nice for your family. But I'm not accepting anything over 100. I just can't square the thing ethically.
What
I'm seeing the money thing totally twist elections, totally twist candidates, totally twist elected officials to do things they would not normally do. I mean, I'm still, I don't think I'm ever going to get the real answer to find out what happened as to why your district, you had somebody who decided to flip parties after she got into office.
Well, as a Democrat, I can tell you that Susan Valdez, who I consider a friend, is someone who spent 8 years up there getting turned down, thumbs down, getting nothing accomplished, not because she hadn't tried and tried and tried, but because she was in the wrong party. And unfortunately, in the time I've been involved in the Florida legislature, which spans over almost 30 years, it's only gotten worse. And it's, those past 25, 30 years have been under Republican rule the whole time. And I sympathize with her. She wanted, in her last 2 years in office, to get some accomplishments done for her district. And while that is not the path I would necessarily take, I don't hold it against her necessarily. I just couldn't follow that path, because that means I would have to acknowledge a certain president as my inspiration. And it's just not the case. But she has been able to get a few things accomplished in her last term. And so, if nothing else, I am gratified as a constituent that she met some success, and the sacrifice, if you want to view it that way, that she made was not in vain.
Well, John, one of the things that did happen this session in the House, I thought was awesome, was a unanimous vote on ensuring that our veterans get, essentially discounted medical marijuana cards, and that the medical marijuana system in Florida, recognize their sacrifice. And I think that was great. And she helped lead on that issue. So, shout out to Rep. Valdez for doing that. But like you said, personal politics aside, and of course, when the federal politics come into play, we all got to pick our team and determine, who's our inspiration. And, I want to say that for me, you are actually one of my inspirations. Because when I was an intern in 2009 in the state house, I saw how you ran Rep. Shanti's office. I saw the level of integrity in the face of lobbyists who have huge checks. And I saw that other representatives, recognize your integrity and effort, which is why you've served under multiple state reps, which is why you've served, under the mayor of St. Petersburg, under Rick Kreisman. And I think that there are folks here in both the Bay Area and in Tallahassee who recognize that you are definitely someone who's a man of honor and in a lot of ways, to me, above reproach. So I know that regardless of how things shake out, having you representing us in Tallahassee will be good for the community. So I just wanted to give my 2 cents and personal endorsement.
Well,
Now,
if I may, not to start a mutual admiration society, but I don't think I've ever publicly been able to have the opportunity to tell Chris what a great job he did in our office when I worked for Rep. Shanti, now Judge Shanti. And it was a pleasure. And I don't think you couldn't pay me to come up with a scenario where he ever let us down. Chris, you were magnificent. And I'm surprised you're not running for this office, quite honestly.
Well,
he
you
did
know,
once.
yeah, I had the opportunity last election to do that, and it definitely was something that it's like wanting to represent your hometown. But for the past 7 years, I've had the opportunity to be in Washington D.C. Into the thick of it, work and do some great things for working folks. Building unions for college professors. Helping support and strengthen the union for the support staff in our public schools, and really also get the opportunity to not just to deal with federal issues, but local ones as well, like passing rent stabilization locally, and even getting to engage in the state of Maryland's capital and take the lessons I learned in Florida up there to make improvements. And ironically, a lot of the issues that we have here in Florida with a trifecta of Republican rule, I encounter up in Maryland with a trifecta Democrat rule. And I'm not going to say both parties are the same. I'm going to say that the system is corrupt. The system itself, regardless of who's in power, really does create these issues that are just systemic in nature, where you hit these roadblocks to progress. And it really is that we put so much emphasis on the law in our society that we don't realize a lot of times it's the author of the law that seems to be superior to the law itself. And we see that in these folks who are writing laws thinking that they're above it all over the country. And I know that you're not one of those people. And that's why, like I said, in a system that corrupts everybody, I've seen it happen where people go up there well-intentioned and they lose their compass because they don't have internally they're grounded. And I know that you are grounded, John. You wouldn't have spent over 30 years in public service doing what you do, being in the community and working with folks if not. And so I'm glad that we have you running in this race. Why don't you tell the folks a little bit more about District 64? Like, I know it's my hometown, is here, West Tampa, but it's a huge district. I've walked it before previously when I ran in 2018, and even then the map lines have shifted because Governor DeSantis wants to, pick up a few more seats for his party. So tell us a little bit about this district that you're running in.
Well, geography-wise, if you'll fixate on Tampa International Airport, that's sort of the hub, and then we have areas such as Town and Country on the northwest end of it, and then sweeping down north of the airport, Pinecrest subdivision, Egypt Lake subdivision, going all the way up to Gun Highway, and then down through West Tampa, down to around Kennedy Boulevard, up to the river. So it's West Tampa, Town and Country, and the airport, and places in between. As far as the people, it's I see it as a largely working class, blue collar district. Maybe that's because I grew up there, and that's where my family's roots are, and that's kind of the demographic they fell into. I'm sure there's people that are doing better and some people that are struggling, and all and everybody in between. But it's a working class district. People there get up every morning, they go to work, take care of their families, and they aren't looking, for extravagances, I guess. Now, we've got some interesting things on the horizon. The possibility of the Rays moving to Drew Park, which is in the district, is probably the biggest potential if it actually comes to fruition. We'll have to see. I've said it before. Thankfully, I don't have a role in the decision making process or negotiations with the Rays. But I will say this much. I'm not for giving government money to sports teams in general. But if it turns out that that decision is made in the affirmative, then I will do everything in my power as a state representative to make sure that the roads are adequate, that Hillsborough College is maintained and hopefully improved, and that the people that live surrounding that complex, which again is basically the whole district, benefit from it.
Now,
And
isn't that possible that they may just use some eminent domain to take over some extra land to make certain they have enough to cover everything they need to do to put the Rays over there?
that is certainly a potential. What I think mitigates against that, hopefully, will be the fact that you've got between what Hillsborough College rather than HCC, Hillsborough College owns, and what the airport owns, that they can work things out. I know that you have to leave a lot of that airport land vacant for safety reasons, but I don't know. Hopefully, and I don't pretend to be an expert, but hopefully there's a little bit of wiggle room in negotiation in there. I know that the police station will probably move, and that's because it's in a prime real estate location. You don't necessarily have to have that exactly where it is right now. So there's a lot of moving pieces on the chessboard. And again, final decision hasn't been made, and it very, very well may not be in the favor of the Rays, considering our property tax proposals that will also be on the ballot. Or the Rays won't be on the ballot. Property tax will be. And if a property tax goes away, then that changes everything. And certainly the money that the county and the city would have that you could consider disposable income will evaporate.
Well, there's a lot of things that are going to go into this November election. What's on the ballot. You talk about the Rays and the development and all the changes. I mean, Carlos had his shop in St. Pete. It recently closed. We've seen changes in St. Pete. We're looking here in Ybor and seeing the development and the changes. I mean, the Crowbar is getting ready to shut down. It feels like some of the soul of Tampa is changing a little bit for the sake of progress, and some of the nostalgia and the good old days, the things that we look around aren't necessarily there. You look at like, oh yeah, that Payless is now Little Caesars, or hey, that old coffee shop that people used to go to, or that bakery that people used to go to is now a smoke shop or a barbecue shop, and there's so much change going on. But what hasn't changed, and John, you kind of alluded to this, is the nature of the neighborhood and the fact that people are still working class. This has been a working class area for many decades. It still remains a working class. And like you said, people just want to provide for their families and live the American dream. And one of the issues that the people watching and our folks continue to encounter in Tallahassee, and I hope that you can be a champion for this, because I know it can get done with the right folks, is worker protections. A lot of people suffer from chronic debilitating conditions. They want to be able to live healthy. They still have to work because disability checks aren't it, especially with the cost of what rent is these days. And so, people are still getting fired from their jobs. Public workers here in Hillsborough County, people having to sue and spend tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees to say they were wrongfully terminated. But they've done everything right. They followed the law. They went and got a doctor's recommendation. They went and applied to the state for medical marijuana card. They go to a licensed dispensary to get their medicine, and yet they can still be fired from their jobs. They can still have a CPS investigation, possibly have their kids taken from them. If they get sick, they can't be on the organ transplant list. And Gary, myself, Carlos, we've been advocating with the rest of the Normal Board and our members for many years in Tallahassee. For just the bare minimum of allowing people to go to work who are medical marijuana patients and not have to be worried about getting fired. I mean, we just had a recent victory in regards to civil rights and not losing your Second Amendment rights in the Hamani versus the U.S. case. But I just wanted to see, what were your thoughts on worker protections and just the lack of the fact, for 6 years we've taken this bill to Tallahassee and it doesn't even get a hearing. What are your thoughts on how we can, do better as a state in regards to these issues?
The legislature, in case our listeners aren't aware, is very hierarchical in terms of what bills get heard, let alone passed. And this was a daily struggle of mine, the whole time I was up there, was as a Democrat, as a staffer who works for a Democrat, how do I get the majority party, the Republicans, to pay any attention to bills that we're, advocating for? There's different ways to skin that cat, but none of them are easy. You can go to a Republican colleague that you have a good relationship with and ask them if they'll co-sponsor or carry the bill. If it's a good idea, oftentimes you can get it through if you're willing to let someone else take the credit. If you can, the rules in the House where I worked, the House of Representatives, are your best friend when you're in the minority. You've got to know them backwards and forwards. You've got to know what it takes to introduce a bill that's not moving as, say, an amendment to another bill that is moving. There's all kinds of little tricks of the trade that I think, frankly, I have an advantage in that I know most of those tricks. I know the rules, and I understand, by watching the members I worked for. I started with Rep. Bob Enriquez. His successor took me on. That was Rep. Shanti, and then Rep. Cruz. And I finished out my time as a legislative assistant with Rep. Raywinkle Vasalinda up in Tallahassee. This is I'm being long-winded, so I apologize. But the thing is, there's ways of getting things done where you don't have to change your party affiliation necessarily. It's just that as a representative, you have to have situational awareness, know that you're in the minority, and know that any opportunity you have to move things forward is probably going to come at some cost, whether that cost be you voting for a bill that you don't really like, but is relatively harmless, or you kissing up to somebody that you otherwise probably wouldn't even talk to. It's just the game. And that's my answer.
No,
Now-
that's a great point, John. The politics make strange bedfellows is the term that they have. But, Gary, I wanted to turn it back over to you because you've been working and pushing the bills. You've been shopping them for sponsors over the years. I mean, we've run the gambit on worker protections, on patient protections, on parental rights. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on having navigated this process, and what are your thoughts on us being able to hopefully count on John as a champion?
Well, one thought that I had is the fact that we're about to see a seismic change in the personnel. I mean, not only in local, but state and federal elections, because people have gotten tired of the status quo and how every year it always seems to be the same thing. I mean, we have been going there for years. We've got these bills. We hand them to legislatures. Some of them get filed. They never get into committee. And again, it's a constant fight. And this last time, we actually got, Susan went ahead and put through that bill, and she got a unanimous approval through the committee system, and yet this bill still did not pass. I mean, no matter what you can do, sometimes it feels like we're going up against a stone wall. And we get folks who are coming up to us and say, "I've got a bill. I know it'll go straight through." And I love the enthusiasm, but the reality sometimes is something different. So what we have right now is a bunch of new candidates, fresh faces, who they have great enthusiasm, but they don't have institutional memory. And that is my issue as we see this shift, as the older generation is moving on finally, and the new ones coming on. But without the institutional memory, how are you going to know the tricks of the trades, or will the tricks change? I thought that Perez was going to do a lot more for people with disabilities, but he didn't. And so sometimes you try to predict what the speaker is going to go, we're going to go, and we know, and John knows very well, the House is very much a top-down situation. What the leader says goes, and sometimes you just can't seem to fight that. So, John, my question to you is this: do you see institutional memory being more important than getting fresh faces out there? You who has institutional memory.
I think they complement each other, or at least they should. If you were to get rid of everybody that is on their second term or more, it would be a mess. But if you only allowed vets to be in office, you would lose new ideas. And it's just like life. We'd like to think that, I'm 63 and I've been around the block a few times. But there's a reason why, God in his great design didn't make us immortal. It's because we'd become really terrible creatures if we were, and you need fresh blood. You also need experience. So those two things should complement each other.
I think that's why he sent that flood, because we were living way too long and doing way too many bad things. So, right, Gary?
Absolutely. But I'd like to see the system change somehow make it somewhat more egalitarian, because right now it is not. It is definitely a hard system to manage. You may have the best bill in the world, and it won't go forward because somebody else has a political agenda, or because a special interest has put enough money into it to swing things in the opposite direction. Right now, we see money is actually coming out against cannabis right now. Smart Approaches to Marijuana is out there trying to destroy the rescheduling right now on a national basis. And the good folks over at Mothers Against Drunk Driving is attacking cannabis. Go back to drunk driving.
Well,
that's actually kind of a thing here in Florida.
Yeah, and it's not like we need to solve that epidemic. The mission drift happens in a lot of nonprofits, and that's why I'm glad that we're focused. And our fight remains true, because for almost 90 years now, we've had cannabis prohibition in America in one form or another, and it always has resulted in discrimination and negative effects on the people who utilize cannabis, whether it's looking to utilize it for medical reasons or to commercialize it in a lot of ways. And I think that where we're at right now, you talked about Smart Approaches to Marijuana and what they're doing with the prohibitionists at the federal level and the DEA rescheduling hearings is trying to figure out, they know that the train is coming. They can't stop it. But what can they do to change the route? What can they do to make legalization palatable to the prohibitionists who have made money for several decades on the war on drugs? The rehab industrial complex is one aspect of it. The private prison industry, another aspect of it. There are a lot of people who have a lot of money on the table that's going to be affected by this. And President Trump was swayed and influenced by some of the major multi-state operators who made contributions. This is the president that if you want something done and you got a check to make that happen, you can do it. And we've seen it with True Leave and some of the other large MSOs donating to him. And so it seems like this weird trifecta right now of prohibitionist groups wanting to stop legalization. You got major multi-state operators that want to see it move forward. And then you have the system itself, the DEA and the powers that be at the National Drug Policy Center and the various parts of the executive branch and other independent agencies that have made their bread and butter by keeping the status quo for so long. And then, in the grand scheme of things, you still have the other parts of our government. You have the legislature, you have the courts. Again, the Supreme Court ruling in the Hamani case is really a big civil rights landmark decision that says that, for years, people were criminalized, over-criminalized. I know recently in Puerto Rico, they're looking at taking up a bill because police aren't necessarily respecting the Hamani results and saying that, just because you're a cannabis patient doesn't necessarily mean you can't have your Second Amendment rights. And there is nothing more American than the freedom to say what we want and then that second freedom being able to protect what we have to say and protect ourselves. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. But I don't want us to lose sight that we are a republic at a state level, at the national level, and the people that we elect are the ones that write the policy, that determine the policy, which is why I want to throw it back to John. John, what are the key things that you want to see accomplished? You get elected, you put in 4 years or 2 years in office, because obviously elections every 2 years in the House, but in Florida and stuff, you're going to put in your work. But like, what is it that you want to accomplish? Let's say you do get to run the whole gambit. You're blessed enough the voters send you back over an 8-year legislative career. What would you say that, you're saying, look, I did this. I wrote this bill. I got this passed. I'm proud of that. I can point to that. I can say this is a legacy that's going to live far beyond me. What are those key issues that you want to accomplish?
Well, we have a district that, as we've already mentioned, is a working class district. So my accomplishments are going to be centered around improving the standard of living for people that live in my district, whether it be one, having jobs that you would want to work and that will help you move up the ladder, or having housing that's affordable so that you don't have to wind up renting your entire life, and education. Public education needs to be promoted, protected. It's, as I've said at other venues, it's in our state constitution that everyone will have access to a quality public education. And in my opinion, public education is to state government what national defense is to the federal government in terms of priorities. So those are the three basic things. I don't see myself doing anything necessarily what you would call revolutionary. I think we have a system that is workable, but without citizens and leaders minding the store and making sure that things stay on course, it can go off course. And I think a lot of your listeners would agree with me that in some respects, that has happened over the last 10 years. I don't want to put everything at our president's doorstep, but the ideals I grew up with, that were instilled in me, whether it be through Boy Scouts or through military service in the U.S. Army, a lot of those ideals of stepping up, serving your country, that you owe service to your country, have been downgraded. I honestly think that to be in the U.S. military is not looked at as the honor that it was when I was younger. And I don't understand that. I think it has to do with an attitude of selfishness, that has been promoted by certain leaders, and I'll just leave it at that.
Well, that's a great point to bring up, is that the nature of service in America has really lost a lot of its meaning that we all kind of understand, because we see people serving in these high offices and they're serving themselves, they're enriching themselves. And while the rest of us are out here struggling, we turn to them and we say, hey, what are you going to do to fix this? And oh yeah, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. And I mean, we see politicians, we talked a little bit about institutional knowledge. Yes, it's important to have people who have been in the system and understand how to navigate the parliamentary process. But some of these guys, I mean, they literally are on life support, John. I mean, we got senators on life support. Lindsey Graham passed away today. And I remember in college watching videos of him in the 70s arguing, and you said something earlier. You mentioned that, you're in your 60s now. And it really hit me because I'm like, shit, that was over 20 years, almost 20 years ago when I was interned in the office. I didn't think I was that old.
Now, I should also mention, and we should put it out that a fond farewell to the Latvala family. Uh, we lost the big guy, the man who brought us the growlers, the man who allowed us to fill gallon bottles of brewed beer. And passed away this last week, and that was kind of like a gut punch, because again, that's institutional knowledge gone.
Yeah, that's so true. And I had only one real dealing with Senator Latvala, but it left an impression upon me. About 15 years or so ago, I was between jobs, and someone told me, well, Senator Latvala is looking for a legislative assistant. Why don't you apply? And me being Democrat, him being Republican, I'm thinking, well, that's a long shot. But yeah, I will apply, because when you're looking for a job, you need to put yourself out there. So I applied. He interviewed me. The interview went fairly well, but again, I didn't think I had a shot. And lo and behold, when all was said and done, I didn't get the job. But the senator had the decency to call me up himself and let me know, whereas other people who I interviewed with didn't even let me know that they didn't pick me. So that's my Jack Latvala story, and I have always had respect for him, and my sympathies go out to his family.
Yeah. Now, we mentioned earlier about the prison industrial complex. I remember that fight between J.D. Alexander and Mike Fasano. And eventually it made another change in regards to the way things worked over in Tallahassee. But it shows just how much power the GO and those other groups have in Blackstone in regards to not only shaping who owns the prisons, but how they actually stock those prisons, and how the fact that we still have this pipeline of school to prison. And I'm trying to figure out, is there a way to stop that? Number one, of course, it would help if there would be less pretextual stops of people being pulled over for tags and then looking for a crime.
Well, the only time there was one occasion when I worked for Ray Winkle-Vassell up in Tallahassee, where the governor, back then it was Scott, proposed closing Jefferson County's prison, which Jefferson County was a county that basically only had, it was a one-trick pony. It had the prison, and there was nothing else going on in that whole county. So that was not a private prison. And so, we advocated that it not be closed, largely because of the impact it would have on the local economy. Now, you allude to the prison, the school to prison pipeline. I definitely agree. And I think, and that experience led me to be against private prisons, because if your business is putting people in jail, you're going to do everything you possibly can to make sure your business is good. And I'd rather have a publicly owned prison that isn't in it for the profit, is in it because it's a necessary function to put, those who just can't follow the rules, to punish them, but not to enslave them, So it's a balance. And I obviously, as a freedom-loving American, I don't like anybody having to go to prison. It's a last resort, in my opinion.
Well, that's the interesting thing about where we're at with politics, is that I remember seeing this past couple sessions, folks lobbying on certain bills, and I saw the private prison group, GEO group, donating and lobbying to the same politicians that some of the multi-state medical marijuana treatment centers, like Trulieve, were lobbying with. And I just find that like, wow, when we talk about politics making strange bedfellows, and it was because they wanted to shut down, and tamp down on the hemp industry. And I know that there's been a lot of scare tactics around it. I know that not everybody who gets into the industry is a great operator. I mean, yeah, there's tons of gas stations out there that aren't necessarily following the rules, but they have been not following the rules for decades. I remember being in college when gas stations were selling salvia, and it's like that is a real psychedelic that you shouldn't, mess around with. And then you have a legitimate industry that was essentially created under, Nikki Fried when she was Commissioner of Agriculture. And we're sitting in a shop right now here in Ybor that our deputy director of Suncoast Normal, Carlos runs. And I mean, look, there are people, there are families coming by. It's a legitimate business. And the fact that we have, you talked about, being a freedom loving American, the free market, the American dream has always been something folks, want to get into. And it's under attack right now. We got private prisons and medical marijuana treatment centers all lobbying the state legislature to put small business owners like Carlos out of business. And then even then they managed to sneak in a bill during Thanksgiving break last November to do it nationwide to ban it. And so we're under the clock right now with Congress coming up with a solution to keep these places open. And then we just talked about at the top of the show how there's some influence at the federal level by big money interests. So John, what are your thoughts on all of this? You're sitting in a shop right now. Do you think that this is a type of business that should continue in the state of Florida and be regulated by the Department of Agriculture like it is, or do we need a change? I just wanted to get your 2 cents on it.
Well, one of the things that I think anyone that runs for public office or wants to be a good citizen for that matter needs to understand is that there are people in your community, neighbors, friends, relatives, who may have differences of opinion, may enjoy doing things differently from you. But we, being a freedom-loving American, in my opinion, means that you're okay with that. It's not the freedom to be just like me. It's the freedom to be, to follow your own path. And, I have never had occasion to come into this shop, quite frankly, but I don't have a problem with anybody else, patronizing it. That's your freedom as an American. And if you can't grasp that simple concept of letting people live their own lives, as long as, they're respectful of others' welfare, if you can't wrap your mind around that concept, you really should not be running for public office.
Well, I appreciate hearing that. I mean, the paternalistic approach to a lot of public officials to how they treat their constituents is mind-boggling. Like you said, let people be free to be themselves as long as they're not hurting others. And I think we've gotten so devolved into these culture wars in this state that we argue over some of the craziest stuff. It's like we're arguing over what type of books kids should be reading in schools, and it's like, just be glad that our kids are reading in a lot of ways. I remember Pizza Hut back in the day would give you free pizza if you read enough books. And then to see some of the same books that I read coming up in middle school are now on the banned book list because the governor has a donor who has an issue with us learning about uncomfortable parts of history. I mean, that is just mind-boggling to me. I mean, to see that some of the same classes that I took as a college student when I was interning with you in Tallahassee are now illegal in the state of Florida, like racism in American society. University of South Florida can't even teach probably half the classes that helped me get my degree. And that is just an interesting, thought that you're stepping into a state legislature where these are going to be issues you're going to have to tackle. And like we said earlier, probably won't even get the opportunity to get to some of the issues that we were just talking about earlier, like worker protections and making sure people don't get kicked off the organ transplant list for being medical marijuana patients. John, what's your kind of, thoughts on the culture wars that are being waged in Florida right now in the legislature?
Well, to me, it's a pretty naked attempt to whip them into a frenzy, make them feel threatened, put them into fear of their neighbor. I mean, all of a sudden, the last several weeks, I guess, all of a sudden we're threatened with a communist takeover. And I'm saying communist, where? It's like, please fill me in on the details. And I never can. It's always sort of a vague red menace. And I guess the next step they'll come up with some people that they'll blacklist. But I don't want to suggest any course of action, but it just seems inevitable that they'll come up with some sacrificial victims before too long.
Yeah, I couldn't help notice Trump using the word "godless communists." Like I haven't heard that since I was a little kid, and I'm a boomer. I've been around for a while, but I have not heard godless communists for quite a while. And I grew up with a family where my grandfather was very much a union guy, and for that he was labeled a communist back in the 50s.
Well, Gary, that just gives me pause. I work for lobbyists for second largest labor union in the country, who spent millions of dollars, through the PAC money to make sure Trump didn't get elected, to put boots on the ground, and it gives me concern because we've had shows. We had Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith on, and we criticized Alligator Alley here in Florida, and we criticized the private prisons that they're putting immigrants into. And we've all said when they run out of people to deport, these private prisons still have contracts. They still need to keep them full. Who's going to go in them next? Is it going to be people who smoke cannabis? And are we going to go back to a backlash of recriminalization? Is it going to be, like you said, the president recently said he talked to Geo Group and he wanted to know if they had room in the immigration detention centers for communists. This is something that we should be concerned about. We shouldn't gloss over, but we have these 24-hour news cycles and we move on to the next hot topic in pop culture that we're really not paying attention to. Like, wow, this is some really scary shit at the end of the day. John, I wanted to throw it back to you, man. I mean, what are your thoughts on the fact that the president said, hey, should we throw communists into the prisons with the immigrants?
Why don't we not put either of those people, those groups in prison? Why don't we just get back to the idea that we're a nation of immigrants, a nation, we're the melting pot, and that should not be a threat to anybody. I've been inspired by a lot of the people that I've known in my life who came over from another country and worked their tails off. And I think, frankly, for some of the Trump supporters, that's what they feel threatened by, is a work ethic that might just put them to shame. And an outlook that just because you were born here, you are entitled. What I've sometimes thought, what would happen if instead of the 14th Amendment allowing for birthright citizenship, what if they did get their way, and instead of being born a citizen, you had to somehow earn it? How many of us would earn it? I'm not saying that's what should happen, but what if that did happen? Could you ask yourself, well, what have I done to earn my place as an American citizen? I don't want it to come down to that. I am in favor of the 14th Amendment, but it's pause for thought. We need to keep this. It's just like we were talking about earlier. There's experience, and then there's youth, and wanting to change things for the better. And those two things should complement each other. Our U.S. citizens who were born and raised here should feel like they can work hand in hand and make the country a better place with these new citizens that come over and hopefully get naturalized and take their rightful place as citizens eventually. I'm not threatened by people with a work ethic who don't have much going for them, who want to work hard and make their way in the country. That's who my ancestors were, quite frankly, and they were good people.
And speaking of ancestors, I mean, 64. I'm not certain of the statistics, but it is one of those majority minority districts, and you got a lot of Cuban folks of Cuban ancestries who don't want to put salami on their Cuban sandwiches. Thank you. and those that do. And then when we have the South Florida, where we also have folks of more recent Cuban ancestry who are usually pushing Republican. So that's kind of an interesting district to have to maneuver. So my question to you is basically, what is your platform for the people in your district? Because that's who you're going to be representing.
Well, I guess on one level, I don't put a lot of thought into that question because, I've been living there since I was a baby and working there. And so it's almost, I would say it's something that's so deeply ingrained in me that I don't give it a lot of thought. Sometimes I think about my ancestors, as I just mentioned, and they came over a little over 100 years ago, and they worked in restaurants, they worked wherever they could get a job, and for them, in retrospect, they were able to purchase homes. They were able to send their children to college in many cases. And the American dream was something that was achievable for them. They just had to work for it. And I guess that is my goal for my district, is that promise continues, that whether they just came over from another country or they've been here, their ancestors for 100 years, that they still have an avenue to success and to moving up, and that their children, do as well, because that's sort of been the story of many, if not most, of the people that are my neighbors and friends and relatives. And we're not asking for much more than that, just an opportunity to work hard and move up in the world.
Man, that's awesome, John. I mean, one of the things that on that last question Gary just asked you, I remember getting that question when I first ran for office from people I had known my whole life. What's your platform and why should I vote for you? I was like, it used to frustrate me actually, because I'm like, what do you mean? You've known me my whole life. I've not changed. I'm still the same person I was before I filed the paperwork last week. And what do you mean you got to weigh it between the other guy? Do you have his cell phone number? Do you come eat at my house on Sundays? So I definitely get the frustration with that question sometimes, and having to articulate it, because being a candidate and being your genuine self aren't always the same thing in politics. It's so crazy to see that when I went, since I've been in DC, it's like these Congress people are not the characters they play on television. When you actually get to have one-on-one conversations with them, it's like, okay, that person actually doesn't talk like that normally, and that person isn't as big of a jerk as they pretend to be, or when the cameras are rolling. And I think that is one of the things why I really appreciate you running for office, because you have not changed who you are. You are who you are. The package is right there on the table. There's nothing hiding behind the back. There's no trick up the sleeves. And I think that's refreshing actually to have for our district, is having someone who's like been here in the district for decades, putting in the work. It's a name that it's folks that recognize you. So I would just want to close out by telling the listeners and folks out there who are going to be watching, and all the clips chopped up later on YouTube, how can they get in touch with you? How can they support, and what do you need to take it to victory, on August 18th?
Well, obviously, voting on August 18th in the Democratic primary is what the effort is focused on. If you want to learn more about me, my website is jrod4, that's the number 4, staterep.com. And if you'd like to contribute to the campaign in terms of campaign contribution, you can do it through the website, but just keep it $100 or less, because I don't want you to think that I'm for sale. But those I guess the 3 main ways. Maybe tell your friends and relatives that you heard about something good about me, and that they should consider me. This particular race there's 6 people running, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and it's generated a lot of interest. And so there's a lot to choose from. And I would like to earn your vote, but I will also say with equal candor that it's not, don't believe people when they tell you that the nation's going to fall into ruin if you vote for the wrong person. The nation's a lot stronger than that. And if you vote for me, yeah, I think you're voting for the right person. But if you vote for one of the other people running, it'll be okay.
Well, John, I truly do appreciate you joining us here in the studio today. There is a lot to be said about the future of the nation and how things are going to go. I think that if we have you as a state representative, we're going to be okay here in the Tampa Bay area. There is so much out there that people have anxiety about and fear about, and just looking to you for steady leadership and again, institutional knowledge, and also the fact that you're not taking campaign contributions from these huge PACs. You're not taking money from big business. You can't be bought. Makes all the difference in the world, which is why this race is getting so much attention, because it really is a microcosm, a bellwether in District 64 of how the Greater Bay Area is going to vote, how Florida is going to vote. And so in this working class district, how working class people cast a ballot and who they cast it for, whether it's going to be someone who has institutional knowledge like yourself and who has an irreproachable integrity, if it's going to be someone who might be a veteran politician who has no problem taking slimy money from folks, or if it's going to be someone else who with newer ideas who may not understand how to navigate the system. I mean, so there's some serious choices on the table for voters. But I would say if you all are on the fence, go check out John's website, jrodforstaterep.com. Check out these clips here. Go back, watch the whole episode from the beginning, and you'll know that you're making the right choice, at the ballot box. And with all of that, John, Gary, I think it is time for the news. So
Go for the news.
Yeah, let's roll that beautiful news footage. All right. So at the top of the news, and I think it is important for something for me to really talk about because it's what got me into this movement. When my dad was diagnosed with a terminal form of dementia, and had a lot of Alzheimer's related symptoms, it really stuck me really hard in having to adapt and take care of him, in addition to going through my master's program at the time. And recent studies show, according to a meta-analysis of randomized clinical trials published in the American Journal of Geriatric Psychiatry, that the administration of cannabis-based products reduces neuropsychiatric symptoms in Alzheimer's patients. And this is being done by a team of investigators from Brazil and the United States that evaluated the results of 7 studies involving 221 participants with moderate to severe Alzheimer's disease. Now, the study participants used a variety of cannabis-based formulations, including plant-derived tinctures and oral synthetic THC, which is the FDA-approved dronabinol and nabilone. And in the systemic review and the meta-analysis of the randomized controlled trials, the cannabinoid-based therapies showed lower neuropsychiatric symptom and agitation scores than the placebo in patients with moderate to severe Alzheimer's disorder. And, in the grand scheme of things, this is showing that this is clearly a safe type of therapy. And I can tell you personally, it does work. More than that, when it comes to these traumatic brain injuries, folks who suffer from strokes, folks suffering dementia, a lot of age-related illnesses, cannabis has anti-inflammatory effects, and the inflammation of the brain speeds up a lot of the deterioration from these conditions. And so I think it's great that we have research coming out there that are showing some, promising things. My dad also struggled for many years with heart problems. And I think about, the nature of where we are with cannabis science today, just in the past decade, since he's been gone versus now. And one of the recent studies that came out, and I think it's important to talk about here on the news, is clinical data that's been published in the Journal of Cannabis Research. And this is research coming out of the United Kingdom that shows that the oral administration of CBD results in statistically significant reductions in blood pressure. British researchers evaluated the results of 4 randomized clinical trials involving 120 patients. In all 4 studies reported reductions in systolic blood pressure compared to the placebo, while 2 of the studies also reported drops in diastolic pressure. And the most significant reductions occurred in participants who consumed high doses of CBD, upwards of 600 milligrams per day. And participants with and without hypertension experienced blood pressure modulation with no serious side effects reported. Why is this important? Well, because again, we hear from the prohibitionists all the time. There needs to be more research, and we don't know about the efficacy of this, or is this drug going to be dangerous? And it's because we've had a boogeyman in regards to cannabis therapy for so many years with not enough scientific research, and the science in every way, shape, or form is showing that it helps. Now, one of the things I think is interesting is where doctors are in all of this. And so, recent survey data that's been published in the Journal of Cannabis Research shows that 8 in 10 U.S. healthcare professionals actually acknowledge that cannabis has therapeutic efficacy, and an even greater percentage says it should be legal for medical purposes. Now, if we want to go all the way back to the beginnings of prohibition, formally in 1937, you actually had doctors from the American Medical Association telling Congress, you should not pass the Marijuana Tax Act. The cannabis is not harmful. It's therapeutic in a lot of ways. And out of 879 healthcare professionals, including mental health professionals, registered nurses, and physicians that participated in this survey, to see that most respondents, 85%, regardless of what their role is in healthcare, believe cannabis have legitimate therapeutic uses. And patients who, they've encountered patients who use cannabis and seen it improve. I know some of you watching, you comment all the time, it's helped me, it's helped my life. Some of you are veterans that have, battlefield scars that aren't visible, that it helps with and helps calm you down, helps with triggers. Sometimes you have knee pain and back pain from your service, and it makes all the difference in the world. I know some folks have had major surgeries that have occurred in their life, and the inflammation and just being able to move without pain is so important. Overall, 95% of respondents in the survey express support for the legal medical use of cannabis. 95%. And 74% of those medical professionals say they would personally recommend cannabis therapy to their patients, with 89% of respondents acknowledging they have patients who are actually current cannabis consumers, which goes back to, one, our medical schools need to do better in educating doctors and medical professionals. I know that we have some here in the Bay Area that are great, but it's few and far between. And 2, the fact that there are so many misinformed folks or malinformed as well, where there's bad information out there, or true information presented in a bad way. We see it all the time in Tallahassee when we're advocating for these things. And there's always some medical expert with a Harvard degree telling the Florida legislators that, if you adopt this pro-cannabis policy, the sky's going to fall. If we want to talk about the value that cannabis brings, I think women are a great group to talk about it. So many of our board members are women, and they talk about the issues that they have and how cannabis helps them with issues that are unique to women. And according to survey data published in the Journal of Health Science Reports, middle-aged women frequently acknowledge using cannabis products in place of the prescription medications to help them manage anxiety or depression. And this is research coming out of the University of California at San Diego and the University of Central Florida right here in the Orlando area. They surveyed 412 women with a history of past cannabis use in the last year. The mean age of respondents was a 52-year-old woman, and 42% of respondents said that they actually substituted cannabis for the prescription anti-anxiety or antidepressants that they're given. And the women who reported difficulty sleeping were most likely to report substituting cannabis products for traditional medications. The results are consistent with prior surveys, finding that consumers often acknowledge using cannabis to mitigate their symptoms of anxiety and depression. And the study emphasizes that the increasing trend of cannabis substitution for prescription medications among women is who experience moderate levels of anxiety and depression. These findings underscore the need for further research to clarify the relationship between cannabis use, mental health outcomes, and co-occurring substance use, with a deeper understanding of these interrelated factors being essential for informing clinical interventions and public health strategies that are going to be aimed at supporting women with anxiety and depression who turn to cannabis as an alternative treatment. Now, that's a nice way of the study, the author of the study basically saying, hey, I don't want to lose my funding for my study by being pro cannabis, but we should do some more research on this. And I think that's great. There should be just some more research done. But again, we talk about all the time that becomes a crutch for policymakers to do nothing and kick the can down the road. I know I experience it in Maryland all the time. Well, they'll study a bill rather than passing a bill. And it drives me up the wall sometimes. It's like, we don't need to study this anymore. We need action. And I think that's part of what we need in regards to public policies, action to fix things. One of the things that I like to see our state legislature do is truth in labeling, and making sure that medical cannabis products actually are disclosed of, what pesticides might be in it, what fungicides might have been sprayed on it, or does it have the proper levels, and it hasn't been tested, and is the testing accurate? Because we've even seen medical marijuana treatment centers bribing testing labs and just throwing the integrity of the process out the window to get favorable results to sell more marketable products. And that brings me to one of my final news stories today, which is that when it comes to CBD products, and I know, Carlos, this will be of interest to you because you do things above board as a business owner, but not everyone does. And according to data that has been published in Phytochemistry Letters, more than 2/3 of commercially available hemp-derived CBD products are inaccurately labeled. And this is coming from research out of the University of Malta, which assessed the findings of 28 analytical studies that evaluate the label integrity of unregulated CBD products. Of the 937 products evaluated, only 31% contained the percentages of cannabidiol that were within, plus or minus 10% of what was advertised on the product's label, meaning that they're off more than 10% is wild. And some of the products also tested positive for the presence of heavy metals, solvents, and synthetic cannabinoids. And so, last fall, federal lawmakers passed legislation that tightened federal restrictions on the production and sale of certain hemp-derived CBD products. And since then, President Trump has repeatedly called upon Congress to loosen those restrictions, which are set to take effect this November. So for the sake of, several bad actors, a lot of well-meaning and law-abiding business owners are going to be negatively impacted by this, which is why it's important that Congress get off its behind and actually take some policy action on it. And so the clock is ticking. It remains to be seen of how it's all going to shake out. Again, we got into this, and with Gary, we talk about it all the time with legal issues, and not everybody's as well informed as they need to be on it. So Normal has been doing for over 40 years informing folks. We have a legal seminar that is done annually in Key West. And the Normal Key West Legal Seminar is coming up November 12th through the 14th at the Reach in Key West. And this is a fully legal accredited seminar. So if you're a lawyer out there who needs continuing legal education credits, or you're someone who's interested in the cannabis industry, or you want to know more, if you're a policymaker and you happen to be a lawyer on the side, because that's what our legislators do, they all have jobs as a part-time legislature, then this would definitely be an opportunity to hear from the experts, meet with our National Legal Committee, get to talk to our board chair Joe Bondi, who was our co-counsel of record in the Hamani case, our board member Nikki Freed, who helped co-author the brief, and really talk more about if you're in regards to criminal defense and public policy, industry regulation. The Normal Key West Legal Seminar is for over 40 years has been just a great opportunity to network and really be on the forefront of all of this.
And a great place to decompress after the election, after you spend all that time sitting there monitoring the polls.
November elections, most definitely is going to be a great time to decompress. So I hope folks get the opportunity to go check it out. You can join Normal at the legal seminar in Key West. Just go to normal.org/Key West and check it out. As we close out, I just want to say thank you to everyone out there who's watching, listening, like, share, and subscribe. It only takes a second, but For the vast majority of folks out there, it helps us greatly to ensure that we got more followers, that we can continue to bring you great guests each and every week like we have been. And then, of course, give us a quick follow on Instagram. We had to reactivate our Instagram, with Meta's AI constantly deactivating us and having to challenge it. And we usually win. But in the grand scheme of things, there is still a prohibitionist streak when it comes to social media. YouTube is where we archive all of our past episodes. So if you want to go back and see some of those great episodes, like episodes we had with Tommy Chong, or luminaries like Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, who's retiring this year, or go back and watch this episode here with John Rodriguez, who's running for State House here in District 64. You can check them all out on our YouTube channel. But we need your help to continue to fight and be in the fight for policy change, for criminal justice reform, for patients' rights, for veterans' rights, for the parental rights of patients. In the grand scheme of things, we need you to become a member. So becoming a member of Suncoast Normal, all our proceeds that we get from membership go directly back into advocacy and education. I don't take a salary to do this. Neither does Gary or Carlos or anyone else on our board. We continuously put all the money back into the org to make sure that we can give you all great programming, that we can continue to educate our legislators, and you can help make the difference in legalizing it and changing the world by becoming a member. Now, if you're on the fence about becoming a member, I want you to check out my most recent op-ed that was published in High Times. Thank you to Javier Haas and the High Times crew for just having the faith in me to be willing to publish something that I wrote. I thought that was pretty cool. I wish my dad was around. I could show him, hey, Dad, look, I made it in the High Times. But, you go to hightimes.com, check out why normal still matters in 2026. And, for those of you who don't want to read it, I'll tell you the grand synopsis. It matters because the type of legalization that we see is why this organization matters. We need to continue to shape it. If you want to see people still sitting in jail while people are raking in billions of dollars and your dispensary looks like an Apple store, that doesn't necessarily shake out. If you want, a big cannabis industry that has all the same pitfalls as every other big industry like pharmaceuticals or big ag that we see influence our politics, there's a reason to get involved. This is grassroots driven. This is a democratically driven organization. And we want to make sure that you all, the people, are the ones that are heard. And if you're in an area of this country or you're listening from somewhere else and there isn't a chapter near you to get involved in, go to normal.org. You can start your own chapter. The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws has been around since 1970, actually helped influence and fight for cannabis consumer rights in the trenches since the war on drugs started. Because understanding that it's all about power, it's about money, and it's never really been about public safety. And the propaganda that has been spread over the years and the misinformation really has done a lot of harm to tens of thousands, if not millions of Americans in the longest running war on the American people, which is the war on drugs. And cannabis has made up well over the vast majority of arrests, of negative impacts. And now that it's legal in 41 states, I mean, that is wild to me. Georgia actually became the 41st state on July 1st to officially adopt a medical marijuana program that's actually full spectrum. They have access to it, but they did something unique. In 2023, they became the first state to actually allow independent licensed pharmacies to sell medical cannabis products. And this is a major step because now out of the 11 million Georgians, a handful of vertically integrated dispensaries like we started out here in Florida could never realistically approach their full population. In Florida, the original plan that our state legislator came up with was 5 dispensaries for a state of 20 plus million people. In Georgia, they got it right. They now have 120 independent pharmacy partners actively distributing medical cannabis products. And now it's estimated that 90% of Georgia's population is within a 30-minute drive of access. So they're doing right by their people, despite the fact that, it's been a slow go. And I think that's here in Florida, something that we need to continue to work on in electing the right of people in office, getting people like John in there, people who have the pulse of the community and the people, and addressing a lot of these issues. So, and that's the normal news, Gary.
All right, and one thing I'd like to point out again is that somebody had recently said, "Why do you only have Democrats on?" Okay, I'll give you the short answer. Because the Republicans doesn't want to come on.
Well,
I
you
mean,
know,
we have
funny enough,
tried
Gary,
and
I'm
tried and
working.
tried.
I'm working. I made some calls this week. I called some of the young Republicans who have some candidates that are challenging the status quo in their party. So my goal is that before this primary is over, we will have at least one Republican candidate on the show who's willing to challenge the status quo and champion the needs for cannabis patients in the state of Florida.
I mean, it is no, I am not under the misapprehension that only Democrats are pro cannabis, because I know damn well, because I have partaken with Republicans in both Tallahassee and Washington, D.C. And I can tell you for a fact, Mike Gates, that there's no monopoly on that. And yet,
No, yeah,
we're
being a cannabis
constantly asking the
consumer-
GOP to come on, and they're
Yes,
constantly
we
saying,
are.
I'll get back to you, and then they don't.
Well, you know, again, it talks about we talked about a little bit today. You know, John doesn't care about big business and their dollars, but you know, when we talk about the private prisons and the rehab industrial complex and so many other stakeholders that are cornerstones of the Republican Party's fundraising base, then you start to get the answer as to why you're not seeing a lot of the GOP folks come on here and talk about, you know, why they won't pass worker protections and why they won't get it done. I mean, but again, to be fair, Gary, we are a nonpartisan group. We're just advocating, you know, hey, if one party says this is our platform, you know, we should put y'all in jail for it, which has pretty much been the GOP platform since the Nixon administration. I'm sorry if it's hard to find folks. I mean, shout out to Joe Gruters for coming on the show. Shout out to Jeff Brandish for coming on the show. Shout out to Congresswoman Nancy Mace for coming on this show. There are brave Republicans who do step up and willing to be in the hot seat and answer the hard questions. But again, they are few and far between. And even then, there are some Democrats out there who won't come on the show. Yes, I'm talking to you, Senator Rouson. We're still waiting for you to come on and have this debate with me. But you know,
we had Barney Bishop on, a Republican lobbyist of the utmost degree.
Of the Florida private prison industry. Yes, if the private prison lobbyist is not scared to come on and debate, then come on, let's have some accountability. And I would say this to you, Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz. We want you to stand up on your prohibitionist platform and come on the show. So, you know, it'll be interesting enough to see how it all shakes out with this election. But August 18th is the primaries in Florida. So this is the week that you need to make sure your voter registration is up to date. Make sure you got your vote by mail ballot requested. You know, it is going down, and party primaries matter because Florida is a closed primary state. So if you are not a registered voter for that party, you won't be able to elect those people for those legislative executive offices. You're only allowed to actually cast a ballot for like school board or some of the nonpartisan races that are on the primary ballot, which leaves a lot out. You know, I encountered this recently in Maryland because my wife, who is a you know, newly certified U.S. citizen, naturalized citizen, cast her first ballot up there in the Maryland primaries, and it will. Being a closed primary state, they wouldn't even let her vote for the nonpartisan offices. They're like, no, you need to cast a provisional ballot or you need to change your party. And I was just like, wow, really, we are locked into a system where they're like, which gang are you a part of? And you need to pick a color and pick a side. And I mean, for a lot of voters, that doesn't sit well. And they're looking for the opportunity to cast their ballots. I know some of these primaries are considered what they call a universal primary. If no Republican runs and no write-in candidate runs, then anybody of any party can vote in the Democratic primary. But that's few and far between, and we've seen the write-in loophole close a lot of primaries over the years. This is a closed primary in District 64 in the Tampa Bay area. So again, if you want to vote for John, you need to register to become a Democrat. If you want to vote for one of the Republican candidates on that side of the aisle, you're going to need to vote and register as a Republican. You're only going to get to vote in one party's primary. So we've done our due diligence of letting the voters know what's going down, but definitely get out there, hear more. There's a lot of candidate forums going on. We're going to continue to bring you great guests here in the rotation. We're actually booked up all the way up until the primary, the Sunday before the primary, which we're holding for a special surprise guest for folks. But we have some amazing folks running for state Senate. We have folks running for United States Congress that are coming on the show. We have folks that are going to be running in various other local elections, and actually recently have some mayoral candidates and candidates for governor of Florida that are going to be coming on the rotation in the next couple months. So again, hit that like and subscribe button so you can see when we go live, and tune in each and every Sunday live at 11 a.m.
And Matt the welder, Matt Taylor, Matty boy, get your ass over here. I can't. You got to stop ghosting me, dude.
Oh man, it's okay, Matt. If you don't want to return Gary's call, you can text me. It's all right. It's no problem. I know.
Otherwise, I know where your dog is parked.
Gary, no. I seen how that Dave Chappelle movie goes with Danny DeVito and Norm Macdonald. We're not kidnapping anybody's dog to get him on the show. Not doing that. Sorry.
All right. With that, dudes, have a great week.
We appreciate everyone. We'll catch you next week in the rotation.
Absolutely.